Hello and welcome to Legalese 123. I'm your host, Missy K. Welcome back to another episode. What are we going to talk about today? Well, I woke up today with a very massive headache, and I'm not sure if it's the weather or it's the time change, but it was a doozy. Hey, did you know what today is? Da, 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 da. Today is November 5th. It is Back to the Future Day. Yeah, I mean, you can date myself if you know what that movie is. Anyways, Marty goes back November 5th, 1955. So, just to let you know, that's the day he went back in time. Gotta get back in time. All right, so wanted to give you that heads up. So, okay, what are we going to talk about today? Well, as you know, the dominoes are starting to fall in the Karen Reed case. So we're a little bit out of order with the cast of characters in the Karen Reed trial, and we will go back and spell out and look at highlights and stuff from the trials and who the cast of characters are. Today, we're going to focus on the Canton Police Department. Why? Because we got an update, and I'm going to share with you. Who are we talking about today? All right, let's see. Okay, here we go. So, a member of the Canton Police Department we've got a member of the Canton Police Department is being placed on leave due to allegations of misconduct. So the town of Canton released a statement on Monday that says that they are concerning a town's police department, which discovered during an investigation of a former member of a different law agency. Who could that former member be? Is it related to one ex-trooper, Mass State Police person, Michael Proctor? Maybe, but we'll circle back to him. Right now, we're talking about Sergeant Shaun Good, was immediately placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal affairs investigation. So what does that mean? So we're going to remove this and we're going to come back to me. All right. So as I said, we're a little bit out of order with the cast of characters who testified or who were involved in the Karen Reed trial. So, Shaun Good of Canton PD was put on administrative leave. Why? Well, because everything is and will be linked to former trooper Michael Proctor. He was a Massachusetts state police officer who was fired from his job. He was trying to get his job back. He had a union attorney representing him. And back on October 17th, it was revealed that all of his text messages from his personal phone, including things that were on his iCloud messages, images, etc., were not deleted after all. He had stated that he deleted all of his account. He got rid of his phone or rehomed his phone. I say that in quotes because that is a common theme throughout the cast of characters in the Karen Reed trial. And that he did not believe that there was anything that was going to be found on his phone. Well, surprise! It was. And these are the type of things that they found. There was vulgar and misogynistic text messages about Karen and her health condition, images of intimate body parts in a text chat that belonged to individuals not involved in the conversation, meaning he often had text threads with him and his buddies from middle school and high school, and they were saying that these body parts weren't related to them. There was a name of a sexual assault victim, racial slurs, and other inappropriate language text chats, audio files, video files, emails, photos spanning many, many years, dating back to 2013. Now, this was on October 17th, and here we are. It is November 5th, but earlier this week, Shaun Good was placed on paid administrative leave. Is there something in the Proctor text that also implicates Shaun Good? Shaun Good is a Canton police officer, and we'll go through what his career has been. He grew up in Canton. He is really good friends with Michael Proctor's sister, Elizabeth, and knows a whole bunch of other people in the town of Canton. And everybody is interconnected. And this may be why one of the reasons as to the investigation into John O'Keefe's death was, uh, you could say, bungled, if you want to say, is that everybody was interconnected. And people often say, how can this conspiracy go beyond the mere 50 plus people? Well, if you're in a small town, you kind of like sweep things under the rug. So this is just the tip of the iceberg of Michael Proctor's phone and what will be revealed in times to come. But we'll do a deep dive into Michael Proctor on another podcast. So today we are zeroing in on Canton PD and perhaps why did Shaun Good get put on paid leave. So let's do a little recap about John O'Keefe. Remember, John O'Keefe was found unresponsive and later declared dead on the lawn. Well, he wasn't declared dead on the lawn of 34 Fairview. He was transported to the hospital where he was later pronounced dead. But he was found on the lawn of 34 Fairview in Canton, Massachusetts. John O'Keefe, was a Boston police officer. He was found on the lawn of Brian Albert's lawn, who was also a fellow Boston police officer. After a night of drinking at two local bars, Karen and John were invited to the home of Brian Albert for another party. Again, Karen didn't want to go into the party, but John got out to see if they were invited. John didn't come back out, so Karen drove off. She went back to John's house. She fell asleep, woke around 5 a.m., noticed that he wasn't home yet. It was very unlikely for him never to come home. Remember, he also was taking care of his niece and his nephew after the death of his sister and his brother-in-law. He was now their guardian. So it was a rare occasion for him never to be home. So Karen called Carrie Roberts, who was a friend of John O'Keefe's, and she picked up Karen, and then they went to Jen McCabe's house. Jen McCabe is the sister of Brian's Albert's wife, Nicole Albert. Jen McCabe and Nicole are sisters. Jen McCabe was there the night of the party. And so they picked up Jen McCabe and they went to 34 Fairview, and obviously they found him unresponsive on the lawn and called Canton PD. So just a note that in Canton, if there is a suspicious death, the Massachusetts State Police are called in to investigate. Canton PD does not investigate suspicious deaths. Why is that important? We'll circle back to that. All right, so let's begin our little presentation about Canton Police. So as you can see, I made this lovely little slide presentation of who's who in the Canton PD, who responded to the investigation of the death of John O'Keefe, and where are they now? So as you see, there's Lieutenant Paul Lank. He's on the stand in trial number 1. There's Sergeant Shaun Good, who is on paid admin leave. Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, is retired. Detective Kevin Albert. Does that name sound familiar? Well, of course it does. He is the brother of Brian Albert. He got some vacation days removed, and we'll go over that in just a minute. The interim Chief Berkowitz, unfortunately, he is deceased. He died recently of cancer. Chief Helen Rafferty, she retired. Kelly Dever, she was in dispatch. She was promoted to Boston PD. We'll go over her in just a minute. Stephen Saraf, he also responded to 34 Fairview. Lieutenant Charles Ray, we'll go over him. Sergeant Mainy and Deputy Police Chief Tom Keller, and then the current interim chief, Joe Perkins. So let's go over each one of them. So here we are with Lieutenant Paul Lank. Paul Lank was one of the first responding officers to the scene. He noted in his radio transmission that he felt that John O'Keefe appeared to have been in a fight. He didn't look like he got hit by a car. He had a black eye. Again, his hands were swollen. He had a big gash on the back of his head. He had confirmed that Canton police had a perceived bias in the case due to their connections to the Albert family. Lank is also very connected into the Albert family. Canton PD realized that they should have recused themselves, but since MSP, Massachusetts State Police, wouldn't take control of the scene just yet because John wasn't declared dead until later on in the morning, Canton PD had no choice. So Lank testified that he found a broken cocktail glass and a piece of red plastic and taillight where John O'Keefe was found. He also showed how evidence was collected using red Solo cups, which we'll talk about that in just a minute, to gather blood samples, which were then stored in a bag that was later identified as a Stop and Shop bag. Yes, you heard that. There is a grocery store in Massachusetts. It's called Stop and Shop, and you can get a lovely brown bag from them. So yeah, evidence was collected. There was bloody snow, and Lank and Gallagher collected the blood in the red Solo cups, as you see in this picture, because this is evidence. This picture is evidence of the collection of the evidence that they did. And so there's melty, watery blood in the Solo cups that were in the Stop and Shop bag. If you are flabbergasted, you should be. But this is just one of the many sort of bungled investigative things that happened in the death of John O'Keefe. So he acknowledged his long-standing friendship with the members of the Albert family, including Chris Albert, who is, again, a brother of Brian Albert, and had admitted to being Lank intervened in a 2002 fight on behalf of Chris Albert. That's a story for another day. So Lank and Good were the first to go to Brian Albert's house to speak with Brian and Nicole, Brian's wife, and Jen McCabe. So Jen McCabe had arrived on the scene with Karen and Carrie Roberts. Jen went inside the house to inform Brian and Nicole of what was going on. And Lank and Good were the first two that went inside the house to interview or speak with Brian, Nicole, and Jen McCabe. But they didn't interview them alone. They interviewed them all together. And during the cross-examination of Lank, the defense questioned him about why he and other officers didn't separate witnesses inside the home to prevent them from speaking with each other. So today is just sort of an overview of who each one of the Canton PD officers were involved in the investigation into John O'Keefe's death. We are going to do a deep dive, and we are going to go and listen to testimony of each one of these officers in trial number 1, and then who was called back for trial number 2. Recall that Karen Reed was tried twice. The first trial ended in a mistrial. Some can say that she was acquitted. Again, there's controversy over that. And then the state decided to retry her again. So let's see who's next. Okay, Sergeant Shaun Good. Again, he's on paid admin leave as of November 3rd. So who is Sergeant Shaun Good? Well, he was in charge of the overnight patrol and was working dispatch the morning of O'Keefe's body being found. He had answered the 911 call from Jen McCabe reporting that there was a body and he was one of the first officers to arrive on the scene at 6:08 a.m. Sergeant Good contacts Sergeant Michael Lank and asks him to go to 34 Fairview. Good said that he graduated from Canton High School in 1998 and he knew Courtney Proctor. Who is Courtney Proctor? She is the sister of Michael Proctor, who is the lead investigator in John O'Keefe's death. He is a Massachusetts State Police officer. She was in his graduating class. Good went home and got a leaf blower. Yep, it gets really interesting. In the investigative tools in the police investigations, I don't think that solo cups, a stop and shop bag, and a leaf blower are on the tools that you use to collect and preserve evidence. So Gallagher thought it was a great idea. Shaun Good, go home and go get your leaf blower, and we'll go see if we can collect any more evidence. And so he does. Good said that he knew members of the Albert family. Kevin Albert obviously works in Canton PD, so they know him. He's a fellow police officer, and they did hang out socially. He said that he's known him for 18 years, that they've worked together, and that he also knew Chris Albert because Chris Albert owned the local pizza shop D&E Pizza. He was dispatched from midnight to 8 a.m. on the night of John's death. He said that he saw Brian Higgins. Who's Brian Higgins? Brian Higgins is an ATF officer who has an office in the Canton Police Department. Why? Chief Berkowitz let him have an office there. Brian Higgins was one of the people that were at the second bar that Karen and John went to at the Waterfall in Canton, Mass. And then Brian also left with the party and was at 34 Fairview the night of the incident. Why is that important? Again, when we do a deep dive, you will understand. But Brian Higgins left the house around 1:30 in the morning and went to Canton PD. Why? He said he was there to move cars. There is a video of him entering the Canton Police Department and going around and moving cars and doing a whole bunch of other things that could be suspicious. And unfortunately, none of this came out in trial number 1. Massachusetts has a problem with discovery issues. And if you read or seen my prior videos, if you haven't watched trial 4, that is about a gentleman who was convicted and accused of killing a Boston police officer. Apparently, Boston police officers are high priority, except for I feel like in John O'Keefe's case, it wasn't as high priority because they felt that Karen was guilty and we're going to do anything and everything to prove that she was guilty. Because they had their victim, they had their person of interest, and that was all that they focused on. You will see that as a recurring theme throughout the entirety of trial 1 and trial number 2. So Brian Higgins is a key person within the investigation into John O'Keefe's death. There is video in the Canton PD where Brian Higgins had returned from 34 Fairview. Again, Brian said that he did not see John O'Keefe on the lawn. So the incident happened around 12:25, we'll say, in the morning when Karen left John, and she didn't return until around 6 a.m. So if Karen did hit him with her car, then he would have been on the lawn from 12 until 6 a.m. But later on, you'll find out that his body temperature didn't equate to being outside in the cold. And remember, there was a blizzard. So Brian Higgins leaves 34 Fairview, goes to Canton PD to move cars. Shaun Good was at the dispatch desk. And he said that he couldn't remember if he saw him on the monitors or saw him in person. It wasn't until after trial number 2 did the defense get the video from Canton PD, because apparently it was left in a folder from Proctor. But emails and stuff are coming out now from FOIA requests stating that it's possible that other Massachusetts state police officers had viewed the footage of the Canton PD, and it shows clearly that Brian Higgins went through dispatch. So again, are they trying to hide something? Did they forget? Who knows? But there are so many coincidences. And when you add up all the coincidences, you then have to guess for yourself, are these people lying? Are they covering up something? Unfortunately, again, there's so many coincidences that you just can't help wonder. So Good was paid on administrative leave just this last week. So if you don't believe me about the leaf blower, we are going to show you what that looks like. So this is Gallagher's testimony. And here we go.
Ms. Gilman, can we show number 1, please?
Here is Good with a leaf blower blowing the snow where John O'Keefe's body was found at 34 Fairview. So as you can see, that was Gallagher filming Shaun Good with the leaf blower blowing snow. One could say, is he blowing snow or is he blowing the evidence away? You know, I don't know. I don't know what investigative techniques are done using it when you have a blizzard and you find somebody in the snow. Is it supposed to be like an archaeological dig where you got your little snow brush out and wipe that away? I don't know, but I'm quite sure that the investigative manual doesn't say anything about leaf blower. But you know, who am I? All right, so let's get back to Shaun Good. So we talked a little bit about who Shaun Good was and what he did in the investigation. So here we are with retired Lieutenant Paul Gallagher. He retired after Karen Reed trial 1. As you see down here below, I wrote that her first trial was April 6th through July 1st of 2024. He retired in August of 2024. Karen's second trial was in I can't see it because this thing's in the way, from I think April to let's make this big, April to June, and June of 2025. So he was the highest ranking person on the scene when he arrived. Remember, there are 3 people who arrived. It was Lank, Gallagher, and Shaun Good. He told Shaun to go home and go get his leaf blower to clear the snow where John's body was located. They did find a broken cocktail glass, and I believe they found a piece of taillight. He retired in August 31st of 2024, just after Karen's first trial. So Massachusetts State Police could not take hold of the scene because John wasn't pronounced dead yet. Again, they needed to warm up his body in order to determine whether or not he was deceased. So they need to warm him up, resuscitate him, and he was pronounced dead at around 8 a.m. So between 6 and 8 a.m., these gentlemen were conducting the investigation. So Gallagher saw that there was blood in the snow and needed to collect evidence. So he went across the street to Deputy Police Chief Tom Kelleher's house. Tom Kelleher lived across the street at 31 Fairview. The Alberts lived at 34 Fairview. Kelleher's name wasn't ever mentioned in the Canton police report, and none of it was publicly available, and it wasn't mentioned in any of the MSP reports either. But there was some interaction with him that morning. Did Gallagher just go over there and knock on the door and say, "Hey, we got an issue across the street, and I need to collect some evidence"? Gallagher testified that he had spoken to Kelleher, and Kelleher said, "Oh, I've got some solo cups that I haven't been opened yet. So it's sealed in this package, and I'm just going to go ahead and give them to you. So there wouldn't be any cross contamination, would there?" And again, and then they put him in the Stop and Shop bags, and then they took him to Canton PD. But why was Kelleher left off? So it's, there's no testimony that any. So again, we're talking about bungled investigations. So Canton PD really don't investigate deaths. So they really didn't know what they were doing. They kind of were like the blind leading the blind. So there was no testimony that they had gone to any of the neighbors. They hadn't asked for ring cameras. So, isn't that one of the first and basic steps of any investigation? Shouldn't the investigation to the death of a fellow officer be their very best? So Gallagher very adamantly states that he has done the best investigation that he could under the circumstances, and the solo cups in the Stop and Shop bag were a good choice. We'll move on. All right. Kevin Albert. Kevin Albert is Brian Albert's brother. He got some vacation days taken away. Well, why did he do that? So did you know that Kevin Albert, Chris Albert, Brian Albert, and some other of their brothers and sisters lived at 34 Fairview? That is because Brian's parents owned the house, and Brian and Nicole bought 34 Fairview from his parents in 2010. So Brian Albert is also a Boston police officer. Kevin is a Canton police officer. He was put on paid administrative leave / gotten some vacation days taken away from June to September for his related conduct in a case unrelated to Reed's. He was out with Trooper Michael Proctor. We heard that name before. Yes, ding, 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 former Trooper Michael Proctor. They were out in Sandwich, Massachusetts, investigating a cold case. And in doing so, they were on duty, they were drinking, and later on, he texted Proctor about the whereabouts of his gun and his badge. Couldn't remember. Proctor had said that they had locked him up in his car, but Proctor couldn't find his gun, but did find his badge, and he asked if Proctor could leave it in his mailbox. So again, that is just another one of those weird connections or coincidences, perhaps. So he had sent a text to Proctor saying that he was hungover the same day. Now, these texts were taken from Michael Proctor's personal cell phone. Michael Proctor used his personal cell phone as well as his work cell phone. And when you do that as a investigator in the police, your cell phone is exculpatory because you have information on your cell phone that can be used as evidence. So don't use your personal phone if you have a work phone. Just saying. No, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take a legal advice from me. But I've seen a few cases where people have used a personal phone and don't realize that it could be evidence. So, side note, side quest. During the investigation into Karen Reed, the FBI got involved and they did their own federal investigation into the death of John O'Keefe. Now, it's not known as to exactly why the FBI was investigating. Apparently, they were investigating a couple of other things. There was a CDL scandal with the Massachusetts State Police where they were giving out commercial driver's license to people in exchange for pools and drinks. And that was a big case that was uncovered. Um, they did investigate the death of John O'Keefe and also the death of Sandra Birchmore. So, in this federal investigation, they got Michael Proctor's texts. They didn't get all of them. That recently was discovered just a couple of weeks ago when I mentioned on October 17th, they got the dump of his cell phone and his iCloud and received everything. So anything and everything that Michael Proctor had his hands in from 2013 on to 2025 is exculpatory evidence, and you will see his name come up again and again and again. So the text in reference to this case was from the federal dump. All right, now we're moving on to the deceased Chief Berkowitz, who retired in June of 2022. Unfortunately, he did die of cancer in December 2024. But Ken Berkowitz served as chief from 2005 to 2022, which of course was when John O'Keefe passed away, which was in January of 2022. So this was on his watch. So it's alleged that under his command, the Karen Reed case and Sandra Birchmore case were riddled with mismanagement police investigation. Oh boy, so I just mentioned Sandra Birchmore before. Sandra Birchmore was a young woman who was in her 20s. She was pregnant. It's alleged that she was having sexual relations with Stoughton police officers and that she died. And her death was ruled a suicide. Well, her parents didn't think that she had committed suicide, and so they launched their own investigation. And it turned out that she didn't, that it is alleged that Matthew Farwell, who was a police officer who was having an affair with her, there is video of her in going into her apartment, and then she died and he left. Coincidence? I don't know, but he's being charged with her death as well as the death of her unborn child. And again, there are some Massachusetts state police officers who are involved in Karen Reed are also involved in her case, as well as a few Canton police officers are involved in Sandra Birchmore's case as well. We'll go over that, and that's another deep dive for another day. So in Karen's trial, it was discovered that Berkowitz and Higgins were in the Sallyport garage looking at Karen's vehicle for a long time from, quote, Kelly Dever. So it is alleged that Karen hit John with her car. Karen did have a cracked taillight. There were taillight pieces found in and around John O'Keefe on the day of discovering him. It is alleged that she had a cracked piece of taillight from perhaps backing out and hitting John's car when she was trying to go search for him. Other people alleged that John O'Keefe got hit by her car, smashed the taillight, and that is how she has been indicted for charges against hitting him. But again, his injuries are not indicative of being hit by a car. Again, the FBI hired an independent engineering firm, ARCA, to do tests to find out whether or not John was hit by a car. They definitively say no. Again, we'll go over that testimony, etc. But this is a controversial issue because, again, there was some footage that was given to the defense in the first trial, one of which there was Berkowitz and Higgins were standing in in the back of Karen Reed's car. After Karen was released from the hospital, she drove her car to her parents' house in Dighton, Massachusetts. Proctor and Yuri Buchanan met up with her in Dighton and seized her car. And this was later that evening around, let's say, 3 or 4 p.m., the day of John's death. Again, they thought it was her, and so they started processing the scene. And her car is the murder weapon, right? So they towed her car from Dighton to Canton and put it in the heated garage. It's called a Sallyport in Massachusetts. And so ATF Officer Higgins and Berkowitz were seen around the car from Kelly Dever. Dever was a dispatcher in the Canton Police Department. So that, is that a possible conflict? Are they supposed to be there? Are they the ones investigating the case? Just FYI, Canton PD was recused from investigating the case, and MSP was the one that was handling the case. But when they put the murder weapon in the Sallyport of the Canton Police Department, how can they secure the scene and make sure that nobody else besides MSP goes around the car? Again, bungled police work. So there were some more connections that at his retirement party, there was those in attendance: Brian Albert, Brian Higgins, Kevin Albert, DA Michael Morrissey, and Berkowitz was one of the officers who had found a piece of taillight as he was driving by 34 Fairview. So why is this important? Because taillight pieces kept appearing at 34 Fairview days and weeks after the incident. It is alleged that Berkowitz and Higgins might have planted evidence. Is that true? I don't know. It hasn't been completely confirmed, but it is, again, a coincidence that taillight pieces just magically have been found. Berkowitz was one of them that found it, but yet there is evidence that he was behind looking at the taillight with Brian Higgins. Just a note that the Massachusetts State Police CERT team came out. It's a search and rescue team. They normally are called out to find a missing person, but they were called out to search the lawn at 34 Fairview. And they did find some taillight pieces, but it was so small and it wasn't nearly anything that Berkowitz found and or Michael Proctor and other people who have found later on. But again, we'll deep dive into that. So let's continue on. Chief Helen Rafferty, she took over for Berkowitz. She joined the Canton Police Department in 1989. She was the second female officer in the department's history. She served as chief until she retired in June of 2022. She served as chief starting in since June of 2022. She took over from Berkowitz. So she retired in 2025, just after Karen Reed's trial. The Canton Police Department did an audit after handling the investigation into John O'Keefe. Why? Because the townspeople of Canton were very upset at the bungled investigation. So they didn't find any evidence of corruption, tampering, conspiracy, despite the criticism of their handling the crime scene. So if you watch any of the testimony or you saw how the evidence was handled, some people find fault that the audit did not conclude or come to the same conclusions that other people did. They did find a lack of protocol over collection of evidence, and now each cruiser is now supposed to be equipped with proper evidence collection bags and collecting DNA, etc. There is a huge, 100-some page audit that you can be found on the web if you want to go into a deep dive on that. So perhaps, she inherited the bad disposition of her fellow officers, but, due she left due to the aftermath of the criticism of handling the Karen Reed case. All right, former Canton police officer Kelly Dever. After Dever, after the Karen Reed incident and she finding Higgins and Berkowitz in the Sally Port, she had told that to the FBI. She was then promoted to Boston PD. So Dever didn't testify until trial number 2, and it was explosive. We're going to do a mini stream on her alone because, boy, she blew up everything and she deserves her own podcast. So apparently she was covering the dispatch after Good left to go to 34 Fairview. She was covering the desk later that evening when she saw Karen's Lexus being towed to the Sallyport garage at Canton PD. And she told the FBI, because remember the FBI was involved, and FBI investigated and interviewed everyone. She said that she found it weird that Higgins and Chief Berkowitz were in the Sallyport garage for a wildly long time. So oddly, after her interview with FBI, she then became a Boston police officer in May, and her salary increased substantially. Is it possible that she got a job promotion to keep her mouth shut? Some people speculate that. And in her August 2023 FBI interview, she changed her testimony. She claimed that maybe she had a false memory of them meeting in the garage and stated that them meeting with the Boston. So she had a meeting with the Boston Police Commissioner, Michael Cox. He stated to her to do the right thing when it came to testify in court. She said this on the stand. Again, her demeanor on the stand lends to the notion that perhaps the whole thing was a cover-up or a conspiracy. That word again, conspiracy. Is there such a thing as too many coincidences? Are there too many to list? So Dever, don't call her Dever, eventually resigned from Boston PD as she claimed to have a false memory in this case, which would put her in jeopardy for being on the Brady list for future investigations and tarnish her ability to be an officer. Because if you have a false memory in one case, then how can you be qualified to testify in other cases that your memory or what you believe to be true is accurate? So she unfortunately lost her career over the Karen Reed case. Again, as I said, the dominoes are falling. Either you're on paid leave, you're on leave, you get fired, you retire, or you resign. So again, this is just Canton PD, and where are they today? Officer Stephen Saraf. He was one of the officers who arrived on the scene at John O'Keefe's disposition at 6:10 a.m. He arrived at 34 Fairview. He was followed by Stephen Mainy and Sergeant Good. Saraf testified in the first trial that he was one of the first officers on scene. He was faulted for saying that he believed Karen said that this is her fault and that she can't believe that this had happened. And months later, it was never in his initial report. That is a constant theme, not only throughout Canton PD, but also Massachusetts State Police, where they claim one thing, but it's not written in their reports. And then also that the reports are not dated at the proper time, like they're written months after, even sometimes a year later or what have you. So how can a report be accurate if it's written well after the incident? But again, we just check that up too. Is it a conspiracy, a coincidence, etc., or is that just the way that Massachusetts and Canton do their investigations? So it's again another cop who failed to investigate and believed someone else would take care of the case. He also didn't secure the scene until MSP took over. So that is another issue at hand, is that if this was a murder at 34 Fairview, no one took hold of the scene. They didn't cordon off the scene. They didn't tape off the scene until they could further investigate. There wasn't a police posted outside of the house, etc. So that is why there is the controversy over, well, how did taillight pieces, become known? As one of the investigators said, the crime scene spoke to me. Lieutenant Charles Ray, he was one of the Canton police officers to testify in the first case. He testified in the morning of the 29th that he did a well check on O'Keefe's home to see if the children were there. Again, remember, John O'Keefe is the guardian of his niece and his nephew. And since John wasn't there and Karen wasn't there, he was tasked with going to their house to find out if the kids were left home alone. I believe that the nephew was over at a friend's house sleeping, and I believe that one of John O'Keefe's friends went and checked on the niece and took her somewhere. So there was nobody home. So he's just, a guy who just went and checked on it, so he doesn't really have very much to do in the investigation. Stephen Mainy was also one of the officers who were on scene. He's been a Canton police officer since July 2020, and now he's a full-time school resource officer. He doesn't really have much. He testified that he didn't see anything. He didn't see a broken taillight piece at the scene. He was just sort of a non-sequential police officer who was just there investigating. Then we have Deputy Police Chief Tom Gallagher, who is the neighbor of Brian Albert. Remember, lives across the street. So, yep, it's true that Deputy Chief at the time of John's passing lived right across the street from the Albert's house. He had a Ring camera. But where's the footage? Well, Gallagher testified that they looked at the footage and there was nothing there to see. Now, is that their decision to make? Should they have informed Michael Proctor? Because he was a lead investigator. Should they have informed the district attorney's office? Should they have informed the defense? Because remember, Karen Reed is presumed innocent. She could go to jail for her life for presumably killing him. And if there was a Ring camera that was positioned right in the spot where John O'Keefe's body was found, and it has some sort of evidence on there of her backing into him, or perhaps the conspiracy is that Brian Higgins and Brian Albert left John on the lawn later on in the morning and left him to die. Who knows? How did John get there? Nobody knows the answer to that, but there's lots of conspiracy theories. But a Ring camera across the street at the deputy police chief's house could have helped solve that murder. But we'll never know because there was nothing on the camera. Do you find that suspicious? Is that a coincidence? So while Good was getting there and getting the snowblower, Gallagher went over to Gallagher's house. Remember the solo cups? This is where he went to go get them. And, he asked for something to collect blood. So he gave him the brand new pack of red Solo cups to open up and whammo shablamo. That's how they collect evidence. So one would think that the police chief would be concerned that there was, a dead Boston police officer on the lawn across the street from his house. Would you come out to investigate? What are your Canton police officers doing across the street at 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning? Why is there a Massachusetts State CERT team in looking around the lawn? Do you think that you would come out and inquire with your group of police officers? Nah. It was a blizzard and we're just going to stay home and just stay inside. So Gallagher is still the deputy chief of operations at Canton PD. Yep. Now, Helen Rafferty left. So now here we are with the current interim police chief, Joe Perkins. Perkins was the former chief of police at Middleborough Police Department, and he began his career as the provisional police officer in Middleborough in 1989. Woo. And you can just read the rest here. So he's appointed the interim police chief in Canton when Helen left. And one of the things that he did was he kicked Brian Higgins out of the Canton Police Department. Is that a good decision? I think so, because why is the ATF having a office inside Canton Police Officer? Is that a conflict of interests? You be the judge. So he's currently being praised for his handling of Shaun Good's allegations. And will he help Canton heal? These are some really, really, really good questions that we are about to embark on. So this is all that I currently have going on for today in the Canton PD highlights for our show today. If you like this video and you want to see more about the Karen Read trial, because boy, oh boy, there's going to be a lot more, please like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.